The Marshall Project. You can read their story on our news site, Gothamus, as well as their story that landed yesterday about what goes on in prison infirmaries in New York State. Alicia, Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
WNYC support comes from Shepard Mullen, serving clients in Manhattan for over 20 years. With more than 1,100 lawyers globally, Shepard Mullen helps companies address today's legal, real estate, business, and regulatory challenges. More at shepardmullen.com.
Sponsoring WNYC means reaching hundreds of thousands of engaged and discerning listeners who've made our shows part of their daily routine. Find more on sharing your business message with WNYC's unique audience at wnyc.org/sponsorship.
Austin, Texas was known as a funky liberal haven in deep red Texas. Now there's big tech money pouring in and huge growth.
There was a warehouse district in the 80s and 90s, and there were all these punk clubs there. Now it's like gourmet chocolate and an $18 salad place.
Politics, prices, and the so-called PayPal mafia. How life is changing in one of the fastest growing cities in America. That's on the next On Point. Weeknights at 8 on WNYC.
Conflict with friends can be difficult to navigate. On the next All of It, we'll help you figure out how to express hurt and figure out a path forward. We'll be joined by Dr. Marissa Franco, a psychologist and the author of Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. Plus, we'll round up the Tony Award nominations and learn about the Debt Gala. That's debt with a D. I'm Allison Stewart. Join us for All of It, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
It is 6:51. Marketplace Morning Report is next, and then later on Morning Edition, Ukraine and the U.S. agreed to share profits from the sale of Ukraine's critical minerals and raw materials in a deal that both sides are calling a win. We'll have more on that, plus all the latest news from NPR and the WNYC Newsroom. It's a cooler morning than yesterday. We're in the mid-50s right now and mostly sunny out there. Today's forecast, mostly sunny, 68, a calm wind, not like it was yesterday where it was pretty strong at times. And then tomorrow, morning rush hour, patchy fog, slight chances of afternoon showers and thunderstorms, and back up to those warm temperatures will top 80. Sunny and warm, 81 degrees tomorrow. It's 6:52.
It is a confusing time to be shopping for a house.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at schwab.com.
I'm David Brancaccio in Los Angeles. First, stock futures are pointing up this morning after some better-than-expected results from technology companies. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer reports.
Tech futures rose after the latest earnings reports from Meta and Microsoft. Meta revenue was up 16% year over year. The average price per ad was also up. And CEO Mark Zuckerberg says Meta is making good progress on AI glasses and Meta AI. Microsoft reported quarterly net income of more than $25 billion, an increase of 18% for the quarter. Investors were also buoyed by reports from Chinese state media that the U.S. had reached out to Beijing to set up talks over tariffs. A social media account affiliated with state media said there's little downside in exploring that. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
Indeed, index futures are up, with the Nasdaq up 1.7% at the moment, S&P futures up 1.2%. As we use President Trump's 100 days as an invitation to review the overhaul so far, what does a political scientist think who whispers in the ear of corporations trying to navigate these uncertain times? We're joined now by Ian Bremmer, founder and president of the political risk consultancy, the Eurasia Group. Ian, great to have you back.
David, always good to talk to you.
You've written this, but say it aloud for us. The tariff policy is the most, what?
It's the greatest act of geopolitical self-harm I've seen in my career as a political scientist.
All right, but what about as a bargaining tool for the Trump administration to get some countries talking about their trade policies and other arrangements? It works that way to some extent.
It should work that way. And the U.S. is, of course, the strongest economy. It's the most powerful country in the world. But for example, if the United States is trying to get a whole bunch of countries that are aligned to work with the Americans to push the Chinese hard to further de-risk, to decouple, specifically in areas that are important for national security, the worst way to go about that is to pick on your friends at the same time.
And on the subject of prompting or forcing negotiations by jacking up tariffs, does that work with China actually in practice?
No, it's going to work with a bunch of weaker countries, smaller countries that desperately need a deal with the U.S. With the Chinese, they aren't even talking to the United States about trade. And the fact is that they can take a significant hit. This is going to be about 2% of their GDP, but they are convinced that they can outlast the Americans politically in terms of pain they take. And they also see themselves as major long-term beneficiaries as other countries around the world hedge more towards China, and as the Americans refuse leadership in multilateral institutions with the global South and lots of other areas where the Chinese are the number 2 player, they'll become more dominant.
One last question here. I guess it gets at the new world of trade and new alignments that emerge. Does it matter outside of India when you see that workers in India will put together the iPhones that Chinese people have been assembling and then Americans have been buying?
Yes, China has an economy that has not been performing very well. So the fact that the United States and other countries have been trying to de-risk, and now Trump is leaning into a very tough, basically a trade embargo position on the Chinese, that's going to be a benefit to India, first and foremost, but also Vietnam and countries across Southeast Asia. That, I think, is going to be a long-term structural move.
Ian Bremmer, founder and president of the Eurasia Group, the political risk consultancy. Always good to catch up.
David, a pleasure.
And here's President Trump yesterday on his tariffs, China profiting from the things Americans buy, and the possibility of hardship at the toy store ahead of Christmas and Hanukkah.
They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. You know, somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know. And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
It is now the month of May, and we can now look back at the stock market's performance for this turbulent April. Enormous swings with tariff turnarounds, but in the end, the S&P for the month of April lost only 0.7%. The Nasdaq lost 0.8% for the month.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for individuals who want to join an inclusive and unique culture. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers. And by Mercury. Mercury offers banking and financial software to help businesses do more in one place. Learn more at mercury.com.
So the stock market's been volatile. So is the housing market these days. While a surge of people entered into contracts to buy new places to live in the month of March, if you compare existing home sales in March to a year earlier, sales were down in many regions, including the Midwest and the South. And the West, they were up, and the Northeast was holding steady year over year using data from the National Association of Realtors. Marketplace's Samantha Fields has more.
In some ways, this spring's housing market is deja vu all over again.
We're still in this stalemate phase that we've been in for a long time.
Chris Salviati, senior housing economist at Apartment List, says affordability, or the lack thereof, is still the main issue.
We're really not through the crazy price increases that we saw a few years ago, right? Where we saw the median monthly mortgage payment double in the course of a few years.
Today, home prices are still growing, though much more slowly, and mortgage rates have come down a little.
The challenge is, of course, that housing conditions are easier to navigate, but economic ones aren't.
Allie Wolf, chief economist at Zonda, says uncertainty in the economy is a huge factor in the current housing market. People are wondering,
is my job safe? Will the economy go into a recession? What do these tariffs mean for me? If you're trying to make the biggest purchase of your life, Do you really want to do it if you have no sense of what the next 6 months look like?
For a lot of people, she says, the answer right now is no. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
And in Los Angeles, I'm David Brancaccio. You're listening to the Marketplace Morning Report. From 8 p.m., American Public Media.